Welcome to the DRF Sports Podcast, brought to you by DRF Sports. America's most trusted name in horse racing is now providing sports bettors with exclusive data, analytics, previews, videos, and expert picks on all major sports. Bet smarter and have more fun doing it. It's the DRF Sports Podcast, and now your host, Sheldon Alexander. Ready, set, bet.
This is the DRF Sports Podcast, episode 38. Make sure you like and follow wherever you get your podcasts. I'm your host, Sheldon Alexander. And still, there was no Thursday night football, which again is so strange. But luckily for us, as we are sports fans, the Knicks and Celtics were able to fill the void and entertain us with a massive comeback win on a buzzer beater by RJ Barrett to cash a 25-point comeback. I always say my favorite thing to bet on is in-game basketball, and that was an outstanding scene. MSG was rocking. Hopefully you were able to cash, because that's what we love to do. And speaking of cash, have you checked out Cash Grab? Well, Cash Grab is the DRF's all-new free-to-play sports prediction game where you can win real money. It's available to every sports fan in the App Store and the Google Play Store. Win real cash prizes every day, as well as a chance to win big money jackpots. All you have to do is download the free DRF Cash Grab app, create an account, and start predicting who will win the first quarter, how many touchdowns will Patty Mahomes score. Answering questions like these can end in you making real money. So download the DRF Cash Grab app now and win big. And hopefully we can help you win some cash here as well, as we do this pod twice a week. On Tuesdays, we recap the week that was, and on Fridays, it's the Picks Pod. And today, we're heading into week 18. So we'll give you our best bets for the final week of the NFL season, as well as some picks and props for the national championship game on Monday, a big boy episode of the Friday Picks Pod. So of course, there was one man and one man only to stop by and bless us as always. That's my guy, Matt Russell, and he joins us right about now. Well, we're at that place where we've never been before. It's about to be week 18 of the NFL season, and this season has seemed really long, despite the fact we've only added one extra week. But for whatever reason here, the end of the season keeps dragging. It kind of just seems that way. But for us, just means more time for more action. So we will obviously get to that. But first, I'd like to bring on my guy, Mr. Matt Russell. How are you doing on yet another week without Thursday night football?
Yeah, just lost, right? Just a man walking through the desert, or in this case, like snow-covered desert, depending on where you are out there. I almost missed the podcast today. Didn't even really know what day it was. Didn't know what to make of this situation because I'm in transition mode right now. I'm moving into college basketball territory, right? Where it's like, okay, well, we gotta get going on this, because with this NFL season dragging, as you said, the way that it has been. Listen, I was pretty convinced that this season was going to be done around December 23rd. You know, you sit there, you go, okay, like March Madness is around the corner here. Like college basketball is going to heat up eventually, and it's going to heat up well before the end of the playoffs. So yeah, man, like I'm one foot in football, one foot into basketball, and it's a fun time. It's just a little bit hairy here.
We're actually going to switch things up a little. We're going to start with the college football playoffs, because the championship game is Monday, big boy time. And I know it seems weird to hype up a matchup that a lot of people probably could have predicted months ago, but here we are again, Georgia and Alabama. Georgia is favored by 3 points. And I got to ask you this question here, right? I look at that line, and we've already seen Alabama smash Georgia. And everyone after that said, you know what? How dare we have Nick Saban be an underdog? This makes no sense, blah, blah, blah. So you know what the public narrative is already going to be. So how is it that Georgia is favored by 3 again? Like what should I be reading into that?
Well, okay. So first and foremost, I understand why Georgia's still favored in this game. They have the better roster talent, top to bottom. They looked outstanding against Michigan, a team that, listen, they made Michigan look like a non-Power 5 team, while Alabama was making a non-Power 5 team look like a non-Power 5 team, right? Like Georgia technically did the more impressive thing since last we saw these two teams play. Obviously, last we saw these two teams play, Alabama won convincingly. But as you and I talk about all the time, right? Whether it's an NFL football game, whether it's any game whatsoever, if there's a certain result from a game, we're not that close to it, but eventually we'll get to the NBA playoffs, right? A 1-point spread in game one team wins by 20 points. The next game, still going to be a 1-point spread, right? They are not going to make that major adjustment. So there actually has been a major adjustment, right? 6.5 down to what was 2.5 on the open is actually a major adjustment. So when it goes to 3, I'm not also at all surprised by that, because people like me, people, who sort of work over the numbers and sort of have the logical mindset of, hey, like you can't make that big of an adjustment from what we just saw. Yeah, they're going to bet the 2.5 because they think that the game was 6.5 and they think it should be closer to 6.5. So you end up sitting it here on a flat 3 because there's going to be more than enough Alabama money and there's going to be more than enough Georgia money. And I don't know that any side is necessarily going to be needed in this game, although, as you mentioned, there's going to be a lot of Alabama money line money. And you can see already that a game that normally would be around a plus 130, 135, even a plus 140 money line as a 3-point, it's a 3-point spread, it's down to like 125, 120. And, we'll talk about this probably again come Super Bowl. That's what happens in these championship games, right? The underdog takes underdog money line. People just say, pass on the +3, and the people who like the favorite take the favorite. And it sort of leaves this territory in between where the books are hoping that it will land. And I'm actually one of those people that hopes it kind of lands in that area. Now, I would take an Alabama win here, but I'm on Alabama +3. And this isn't just, oh man, like Saban, what are we doing? We should have taken this before. It's just two teams that I think are, not necessarily equal on it from a talent standpoint, because Georgia is the more talented team. But I'm not ready to trust your man Kirby. I'm not ready to trust Kirby Smart in this situation. I think we talked about it on Tuesday, right? Like, he's screaming at Stetson Bennett at the end of the first half because the clock is running out. And I'm like, Kirby, you have the full capability to call this last time out. Like, you are able to do that. Why are you letting this clock run out? And why are you bothering yelling at your quarterback here? Like, this is on you, man. And so that's just a mistake that Saban's not going to make, I don't think, right? And so when it comes to a game that's lined this tightly, and listen, I talk all season long. We talk about coaching and how a lot of these players, like, they don't really matter, whether it's the NFL or college football, because, we see these lines get over exaggerated because a player is out. And it's like, a lot of it's just preparation, coaching, and how you call a game offensively and defensively. And if Alabama's going to be better at that than Georgia is for the 4th or 5th straight time here, I'm going to want the +3. I think this game ends up being a close game. I'm not saying Alabama's going to blow them out. I don't even have anything necessarily on the Alabama money line. We'll talk a little bit about props here in a second. But I just think you're going to give me 3 points here with the game that I think is going to be close because we have the better coach and the better quarterback. Like, I realize that's a rudimentary way to put it. And if I was sort of shouting from the rooftops, Alabama, say, talking like a crazy person, then that's one thing, right? But when I understand and I acknowledge and I can see that Georgia has the better roster top to bottom, and I can still just go, you know what, man, beat me minus, win by more than a field goal. And I'll tip my cap or whatever. And this isn't some crazy huge bet or anything like that, but it's just the side that I like in this game. So I realize it can be sort of considered quote unquote square or whatever. But if you look at it, the look ahead line for the SEC championship game, all the way up until the point where Alabama was tested by Auburn, was inside of a field goal. And so it was that perception built off of Alabama struggling against LSU and Auburn towards the end of the season that pushed it all the way up to 6 to 6.5. Right. And so it was kind of artificial in the first place. So I didn't really rely on that number as being like the correct number in the first place, because I don't think it was, because we had 3 months of over exaggeration when it came to the perception of these teams. So Alabama +3 for me. I don't love anything when it comes to the total, but I wrote about this for the Score, and it hasn't come out yet, but you can check it out here this weekend. One of the props that I like in this game, one of the game props that I like in this game, is neither team to score 25 points. Because in that first matchup, there was like 60-something points scored, right? You had a pick six. You had a Georgia 97-yard drive. You had a couple of explosive plays and explosive touchdowns from Alabama. Jameson Williams, and of course, John Mechie was still, available back then. I think this game could be played a little bit closer to the vest, right? Second time around, maybe Georgia, obviously, we talked about how they weren't maybe necessarily the most desperate team in that first game, and, maybe not as focused defensively. And so we're talking about like pick sixes and explosive plays. I don't think there's going to be much of either of those in this game. And I think this game's going to be close. I think it's going to be played close to the vest. And the team total here for Alabama is 25. And so I think Alabama can win this game, but still be under their team total. Do you know what I mean? I think they can win a low scoring game. And so if I think it's going to be if I think Alabama can win or certainly cover, I think this could be a lower scoring game. And so instead of just kind of sitting there hoping nobody scores and keep it under 52, I'm going to play a little bit at neither team to score 25 points at plus 260. Right? A little bit better of a playoff there. It's not, or a payoff, okay. I should say. And not something that I should be sitting there like sweating because I have like a full unit on it. Something that we can put a little bit less on and it will pay out a little bit more. And we get something like a 24-20, 24-17, 21-20. You guys can do the math type of a football game because both defenses, right? I think both defenses are obviously really good. And maybe the offenses don't have as much success. I have a couple of props, a couple of player props. You think we'd be interested in that? Do you think the crew out there would be interested in that? So we did really well. We had Brian Robinson. I said anything anything around 110, right? Last week, the number was 80.5, and it clears 80.5 by the first quarter. And it probably should have been 110 because the number ended up being 200 plus yards for Brian Robinson. I don't think it's going to work out so well this week for Brian Robinson, right? This is a different type of a game. And the Crimson Tide know that, right? And that's the thing. Like we always talk about coaches. Do you know what game you're in? Alabama knows what game they're going to be in. They're going to try to throw the ball on Georgia. Whether they have success or not is sort of moot when it comes to this, because I just don't think they're going to, one, be able to run the football in sort of a neutral game state. And two, I don't know that they're going to have some, late game 2-touchdown, 3-touchdown lead where they can just afford to just run it for 3 yards a clip and a bunch of different times just to kind of grind the clock out. I just don't think it's going to be that type of a game. So Brian Robinson under, you can get him for 79.5. This is down from 86. They opened this man 86.5 against Georgia. They opened him higher against Georgia than they opened him against Cincinnati. That was a little bit wild. So under 79.5 available out there. We used the same premise last week. Desmond Ridder, right? We took him under his rushing yards. We had to, the caveat, remember that college football, if you get sacked, that yardage goes against your rushing yardage. Desmond Ridder got sacked roughly 1 million times and never had a hope of getting to over whatever it was, 17.5, something along those lines. You're getting a similar number. You can get a 17.5 for Stetson Bennett. I'm taking the under there. We talked last week about how Alabama has tightened up the coverage of the mobile quarterback after Emory Jones gashed them early on in the season against the Gators. Dalvin Cook's little brother, James Cook, we saw him against Michigan, right? He's catching balls down the sidelines. Stetson Bennett's dropping dimes. I think they're going to try that again, right? Whether it's lining him up just on a linebacker in single coverage, get a little wheel route, action, maybe some screen passes because Alabama is getting to Stetson Bennett. I think over receiving yards for James Cook, you can get that at 20.5. I've actually seen a little bit even lower than that. I think that's just a flat out mistake. The guy had 110, 120 some odd receiving yards in the last game, and they haven't made that adjustment for him, which I think is a little bit odd. So we're going to take the over in that. I rather the yards there than the receptions, because if they're going to try him deep a couple of times like they did against Michigan, all you need is one, right? All you need is one, and you might be able to cash that. But also, if you don't get a bunch of catches going deep like they happen to get against Michigan, then you're going to be out. You might have a 3-catch, a 2-catch, 50-yard type of a game for James Cook. So I would go that route. into the touchdown zone here, though we still have a yardage prop as well here. I think Ja'Cory Brooks is going to have a massive game here. And what we have from that previous matchup is a gaping hole left by John Mechie. But we've seen it with Alabama, we've seen it with Brooks against Cincinnati, but we saw it with Ohio State. What happens when there's a gaping hole with a team that has a ton of talent? Some other guy just comes in and fills that hole. Yeah. And Ja'Cory Brooks was the guy who caught the touchdown at the end of the game against Auburn, right? When they needed a touchdown to save the season, Bryce Young went to Ja'Cory Brooks. Then they come back, and Mechie is obviously playing in that game, and he has this massive game against Georgia, but he hurts his knee at the end of the game. And then they play Cincinnati. And as you and I talked about, both today, last week, whatever, all Alabama needed to do was just run on Cincinnati. They know they are not in that type of a game. So we are going to get the pass offense version of Alabama, the version that had, the version that had 420 yards against Georgia the first time around. Will they get 420 yards? No, not necessarily, but they'll have to throw it that much. And with John Mechie out, that means somebody has to literally fill his position, right? And so guess who that guy is? It's the freshman Ja'Cory Brooks. And he had 60 some odd yards against Cincinnati. It's almost like a cash exchange here, right? It's Canadian money to American money at this point, right? You play Cincinnati, you're only going to have so much opportunity to catch passes. And even then he had 60 some odd yards. Now he's going to play in this other game that's going to be a little bit more pass heavy. And his number right now is 37.5. So he's getting priced like a guy who didn't play all that much this season, who only sort of showed up and had his first catch of the season in mid-November. But what happened since then, right? Like, this is the guy he's the next NFL guy, right? He's going to be that guy 2-3 years from now who's going to be in that first round conversation as the annual Alabama wide receiver that gets drafted. And so we're sort of still buying low on this guy who had a touchdown in the last game, who had 60 plus yards in that last game. And so if you're Georgia and you just watched Jameson Williams go for 180 some odd yards in that previous game, and now you don't have to worry about John Mechie, you're probably going to pay attention to Jameson Williams. Now, his number's 110. Like, I don't know if I want to mess with over, under in that. I just know that makes some room for some other guys, and I think Ja'Cory Brooks is that other guy. You can get him to score a touchdown right now for plus 450. Plus 450 for a Ja'Cory Brooks touchdown. So think about it. If it was Mechie, and if you just sort of go under the theory that it's an assembly line of dudes, right? Whether it's Ohio State or it's Alabama, and it's just one guy after the other, this guy might be just as good as John Mechie. Maybe not necessarily today, tomorrow, but certainly potentially eventually. I'm going to bet on him to have a really big game. So I've got him anytime touchdown plus 450. I've got him over 37.5 receiving yards. He doesn't really even have to have a really big game to hit those numbers. You could even do a little sprinkle on the 2+ touchdowns for Brooks, maybe even a 3+ touchdowns. Guess what those numbers are? We're talking 50-1 and 150-1 when it comes to those numbers. So a little bit of sprinkle on those sides, because I always hate when I pick a guy to score a touchdown and he scores like 3. And I'm like, I didn't get any extra money for that. Well, let's put a little extra on that and see what happens. The other guy that I think could score a touchdown here is Cameron Latu. He is the tight end, sort of by name only, a receiving tight end by and large for Alabama. Has 7 touchdowns this year. 7 touchdowns. And what are we talking about? 14 games? Do some quick math. That's 1 out of every 2 games, but just sort of mathematically. And by the way, he scored against Cincinnati as well, right? So when you're talking red zone, if Alabama can't run the football against Georgia, which we think it's going to be difficult for them to do, if the red zone defense is going to be looking at Jameson Williams, that's going to leave, a couple other skill position players out there, and Latu and Brooks are going to be out there. So I think there's plenty of opportunity for some Alabama props there because of the injury to John Mechie and the way that first game went. You look on the Georgia side, there's just not that much there, right? We know the running backs that exist for Georgia, and they all sort of have an equal opportunity to score a touchdown here theoretically. Brock Bowers is a guy that, again, had 10+ catches for a ton of yards against Alabama the first time. You think Alabama is going to let that happen? I don't think so, right? But I'm not looking to bet the over or the under in that situation, because obviously it's not like the total is 100 yards for Bowers. And so, touchdowns, that all looks about right on the Georgia side. Doesn't mean I don't think they're going to score. It just means I don't see any value there. Whereas with Alabama, there's a clear reason why there's some value on some guys there. So Alabama +3. If you want to get a little loose, You go a little alternative line, Alabama -7.5. If you're of the volition of, you know what, they're going to do it again to Georgia. They're going to win by 2 scores. -7.5 is like +280 out there. And then the last one I'm going to give you, and we'll get on to the NFL here because I know you're dying to talk some week 18, is team to score last. Think about it this way. If Alabama's down and Bryce Young has the ball, do you trust the Heisman Trophy winner to get a late score, whether that's to get the game a little bit closer or whether that's to get the win or the tie or something along those lines, right? They're driving late. Stetson Bennett. I like Stetson Bennett, but not a lot of people necessarily do. And when it comes to him needing to win a game with his arm, if they are trailing, is Stetson Bennett the guy that you're going to trust to get the last score? If the answer is I trust a Heisman Trophy winner, but I don't trust Stetson Bennett, which is a completely reasonable answer, there's a couple of different ways that Alabama ends up being the last team to score in this game, either in a win or in a loss here, whether it's they have to come back or whether they are taking the lead and Georgia isn't able to come back. So I think Alabama, anything, it's not going to be even money. It'll be -110, -115, anything up to -120 for Alabama to be the last team to score. So handful of props there for the college football playoff.
Lots going on there, lots of action. I will definitely be on Alabama just because, again, I'm going to keep it simple. Give me Nick Saban getting points. I'll take that all the time in a national championship game. Cool. I'm down for that. I don't know how much I'm down for week 18 because there's a lot of weird things going on in the NFL, right? Because the standings are very weird. As you mentioned, there's teams that, they have something to play for, playing against teams that don't have anything to play for. We've been talking about 1, 2, 3 Cancun for about a month. So lots going on, but let's try to weed through this here and we'll do it a little differently than normal. Let's look at this first. We'll separate it a little bit here and let's start with games that matter to one team, but don't necessarily matter to the other, right? So again, games that matter to one team, meaning that they actually really, really care about this game. We'll start with the 11-5 Chiefs, who are 11-point favorites at the 7-9 Broncos. So the Chiefs are still in the mix, playing for the bye. The Broncos are not, right? Now, does that mean that the Chiefs should be favored on the road by double-digit points? I personally say yes, and I'm willing to lay the points here against a Broncos team that, especially with Drew Lock in the mix, there's nothing good about this Broncos team that I've seen the last couple of weeks at all. Give me the Chiefs in a blowout.
Yeah, I'm not going to disagree with you. I saw at one point early on this week, and this is sort of somewhat thematic, and maybe it's all of the COVID stuff that sort of jammed us up from betting early on in the week, but I am a little gun shy to start firing on Mondays and Tuesdays, not knowing necessarily what's going to happen throughout the week. But at one point, and again, I feel like an idiot for not doing it, Kansas City flickered at -9.5. And I thought to myself, should I just hit that real quick? Should I just hit that -9.5 real quick? And it turns out I should have because they're 11.5 in some spots here because you're right, man, like Drew Lock, because my number makes Kansas City a 9-point favorite here. And I probably have not adjusted Denver down enough. And so we talk about the tax for that we have to pay on some of these teams. And in some cases, you just pay the tax. And maybe this Saturday night game, and maybe because it's a Saturday night game, and God, these 2 Saturday night games are going to be dreadful, I think. They're going to be interesting because they're NFL football games, but like they couldn't be worse matchups. I think I would pay the tax if it was still 10. This right now is just a game that I'm going to stay away from, but I don't behoove anyone from just going ahead and betting on Kansas City because you're right. Like this is not a team that, in Denver that's had Kansas City's number or hasn't even been really all that competitive with them, even at the best of times. And Drew Lock is certainly not falling under that category as well. So this is by no means, unfortunately, like an interesting game to me or sort of a best bet or anything like that. It's really more just like, I'm not looking to bet Denver. I'm not looking to lay 11.5 points on the road. This is a stay away game for me, but it just sort of says, okay, well, how many realies are involved here, right? When you say when they really, really want to win, or they really want to win, or they just would like to win here. And so obviously the NFL set this game up so that they could kind of get it out of the way so that, okay, Kansas City, you win Saturday night, so that the Tennessee game sort of gets its own stage, if you will, for them to, you know, quote unquote, needing to win that game. So if this game's an afterthought in the NFL schedule, unfortunately, that means we're all subject to it on a Saturday. I just don't have anything that I love in this game.
And we're all going to watch it the same way. In the same way, we're all going to end up watching the 11-5 Cowboys, who are -5, nicely in the Vegas zone, against the 9-7 Eagles. And, you know, both of these teams are in, so it's about seeding kind of, but it doesn't really matter. But for me, right, because of the Vegas zone here and the 5-point spread, I'm just going to trust the magic that is the Vegas zone and take the points. That's where I'm at.
Can't argue with that either, right? Is this, you know, really? It's, you know, it's a really system here. And so here's the other thing that's sort of popping up, and it'll pop up here a little bit throughout this week. I think teams, let me put it this way, I think they should have been testing their players to within an inch of their life this week, right? Get as many COVID positives this week if the game isn't critical to you, so that your guy does not get tested over the next month, because that's one of the deals here. And you laugh because like, you're like, this is what it's come to, but like, yeah, this is what it's come to, right? So the Cowboys are without Micah Parsons, Tyron Smith, a couple of other guys here that matter in this game. And you've seen this line shoot up to 7 because the Eagles are in theory going to be without a bunch of guys that got tested on Monday. That's even better. You might even get them back for this game. And so the Eagles have already, you know, done what they needed to do, right? They are in the playoffs. It is sort of out of their control necessarily on what seeding they might necessarily have here, or I should say who their matchup is going to be. Dallas could still move up to the 2 seed. And you and I talked about this, I believe, on Tuesday, about the difference between the NFC and the AFC, right? The NFC, you don't want to be the 4 seed, because that means you're headed to Lambeau in week 2. And you in playoff round 1, you have to deal with either Arizona or LA, where if you don't, you know, you might have the Eagles, you might have the Saints, and that's an easier matchup. Problem is, Dallas doesn't have any of the tiebreakers. So as much as they would really like to get out of the 4 spot, they're really not going to, right? Like it's just not going to happen, because Tampa Bay is probably not going to lose to Carolina, and they have just enough incentive to kind of halfway try to win that game. And so, yeah, like now this number goes down to 4.5 because Dallas gets sort of the second level pops here. We talked on Tuesday about how my number would be 3 in a normal situation. Well, if we're going to find ourselves not necessarily in a normal situation, but back on like an even level playing field where maybe Jalen Hurts doesn't play, but Gardner Minshew does, and, you know, Dak Prescott's going to play, but like how far does that necessarily get the Cowboys if half of the team isn't able to go either? So I don't hate it, man. Like taking the points there, I'm totally fine with that. This is, again, unfortunately, because Saturday is sort of been kind of bastardized by not having real decent matchups here because of, you know, listen, we tried, right? We put all these divisional matchups together and like thinking that these games are going to be competitive, and it just hasn't really worked out this season. It's not, you know, necessarily not going to work out next season. It's worked out in years past. Just this season, it's not that great. So unfortunately, there's not a ton to play in either of these games. Don't hate taking the points for this one. As long as you're getting, you know, 4.5, 5, that's not the worst move either. I think both of these games are probably better left for live betting to sort of see how they play out. Just how much do the Broncos care, especially if they get down to the Chiefs? How much do the Cowboys or the Eagles care? And we'll talk about these Sunday games. A lot of it is literally just going to be have the apps open, have as many games on as possible, and have a plan going in to live bet some of these game situations, right? Because things are going to get a little bit crazy. Now, the one thing, I'm just sort of shoot this out there to everybody. It's week 18. A lot of people have season-long player props. You know, we talk about the on-the-field stuff with incentives, and I think that's what jammed up your boy Antonio Brown. He got a little too into his incentives.
Definitely not my boy.
Shoot me a DM, shoot me a tweet. Tell me what you're sweating this Sunday when it comes to player props, team props, that sort of thing. I've got 2 that are live that are going to be interesting to me. I have the Dallas Cowboys to score the most points this season. at 12-1. And they right now have a 9-point lead over the Buccaneers. So the Cowboys right now, this week, for me, they're not playing the Eagles. They're playing the Buccaneers, trying to not get outscored by 10 points to the Buccaneers. I also have the Patriots for the fewest points allowed in this league. And weirdly enough, they also have the lead. I've got them at 15-1. They have a 9-point lead over second place Buffalo. Both cases, I've got a 9-point lead. What could possibly go wrong with Buffalo playing the Jets and Tampa Bay playing Carolina? Oh God, I'm probably going to lose both of these. One thing to note about Buffalo, by the way, second in defensive points allowed, third in points for. So as we go into the playoffs, be wary that this team is atop both of those lists. When I'm looking down, I'm like, oh man, Buffalo is involved on both these sides. Something that you don't necessarily think of when it comes to the Bills, because I know people are on and off and on and off the Bills, as we tend to be in the NFL these days.
Super strange stuff. And you mentioned just, the matchup's not really working out. I look at it and I say, it's going to work out because everyone's still going to be watching. And same thing on Sunday, still going to be watching the red zone to keep up with, there's still daily fantasy that people will be playing on Sunday. There's still, as you said, season-long props you might have going on. So still lots of action to be had. And that's why we're here. And in case you're not familiar with what's going on, I try to pick every single game for the entire season in my goal to just remain over 500. We've done it so far this season. We're just trying to stay that place now. And also, my guy, Matt Russell, just talks me in and out of certain picks that I might have. So as we continue here, we move to Sunday's sked, and the 10-6 Pats -6 at the 8-8 Dolphins. Now the Pats and Bills both sitting at 10-6, trying to win that division. The Dolphins are not as good as we've historically told them they would be, or we thought they would be this season, especially after their great and epic ride of the 7-game winning streak, which kind of just fell apart, right? Which we were all over. But I'll say this. The Pats normally struggle in Miami, right? Mm-hmm. But in this instance, I feel like I'm taking the Pats here just as a fade of Miami. Because I never believed in them to begin with. The Pats need to win. Belichick will do enough to just win. Miami, get out of here.
This has been a head scratcher for me. And this is, again, another file under a lot of these games this week and when and where I bet them, as I'm an idiot, because this is another one where I sat there this week and was like, I don't understand Miami +7 here. And you, as one does, you listen to, various content, as people are literally doing right now. And you hear people talking about liking the Patriots -6, -6.5. And I just go like, we're bailing on the Dolphins in a sort of a rivalry spot here with Brian Flores. We're doing that easily. And I get it, right? Like the Patriots do quote unquote need to win this game, but I think this is just the first example of a line that got out of hand because of the sort of narrative concept, right? And it's the same people that will tell you not to get too crazy about the narrative, and then will still tell you to grab the Patriots here. And so this line ends up getting to 7, and I'm like, how far is this going to go? Is this going to go through 7, or is there news coming? Because that's the other thing, right? Like you sit there and you go like, we got to talk about the line sort of telling us what the news is before the news tells us what the news is. I'm like, is there going to be something coming down the pipe here that's going to tell me that this game isn't the 3-point spread that I think normally it would be, right? I think the Patriots would be a -3, -3.5 point favorite here if all things were equal. And I haven't seen that. And like you mentioned, this line's down to 6 now. There's still some 6.5s out there, but it has come off of 7 because eventually somebody who was a little bit smarter than I am saw that 7 and was like, you know what? Too far. We need to bet this +7 right now. So they did that. Tip of the cap to them. I didn't do it. I'll probably come in on a +6.5 here. The game will probably land 7. and I'll feel like a fool, but we'll see. If the 7 comes back, I'm definitely on the Dolphins here. It's not a game that I'm necessarily super excited about, certainly not excited about watching it. I talked about how needing the Patriots to not give up a ton of points here. So maybe like the Cowboys game on Saturday night, maybe it just turns into, yeah, I like the Dolphins, but I really could use a nice defensive effort out of the Patriots and then just sort of take it in that way, because there's plenty of games to talk about otherwise.
Yeah, plenty of games to go through here. So I just want to ask you something very quickly here, because the Jags don't deserve many sentences on them, especially in this game. So the Colts are favored by 15 points, right? At Jacksonville. Yeah. The Colts need to win this game, and the Jags need Jesus. The Pats, right? The Pats line kept climbing last week against the Jags, and it didn't matter at all. So do the Jags have any fight in them at all at this point, or are they already in Cabo? Because to me, I think they're already in Cabo. I'm on the Colts here, minus 15, which is not something that I'm normally likely to do. But tell me why I should think the Jags are even in business of still playing in the NFL this week.
It's hard to make that case, right? Like you're right. It is hard to make that case. I mean, the case is, the Jags are like 0 and $1 billion to every other team in the league, but over the last 2 years, they're 2-2, right? In their last 4 matchups. Mm-hmm. I think you've probably seen that stat out there, but was that the 1-2-3 Cancun Jags, or was that just the regularly bad Jags here? But I think all that stuff, like all this other stuff, is built into the point spread. We're talking about the Colts as a 15-point road favorite. And I can get there. I can get close to there, I should say, right? Because we talk about the tax. And you'll find a lot of these numbers are just a little bit higher than the key number, right? And the key number in this case would be 14. And that's where I make this number. And even then, on all sort of equal footing, I would still take the Jags in that spot if it were any other spot, right? But this isn't everything's even. This is we literally have a flight out of here. This season can't end fast enough. And you saw that last week, and you saw it the week before, and this team's lost with 6 straight games by like an average of 17 some odd points, something like that. And you're just like, do I really want to go to war with this? So to be honest with you, I don't. This number was 15.5. I thought we were going to see it move up. It'll be interesting to see if it does get that same treatment, whether it goes up to 17. And so we, think about it this way, right? We saw the Jags as 17-point underdogs to the Patriots last week. Listen, I have the Patriots and the Colts rated pretty similarly. I think people would be maybe a little bit surprised to hear that, maybe thinking that the Colts should be significantly higher than the Patriots, but I have it relatively close. And so if the Patriots were playing in that game last week, and that game was in Jacksonville, you'd have to flip that, 1.5 points to either side, maybe even a little bit lower than that. And that number ends up being sort of closer to 14 or 15. So you can see how that would make some sense that this same number would sort of exist. But if you're back in the Jags, you're getting a point and a half of value. Sweet. Right. Cool. They are well known, past, present, and probably future for blowing right through that value and having you lose. So we've probably talked already way too much about this game, but it is worth mentioning that yes, a point and a half, this line is off by just a little bit here, but I don't know if that it matters.
We're heading back to the Vegas zone with the 8-7-1 Steelers, fresh off, a grand farewell to Big Ben Roethlisberger. Yeah, great times. Cool. Mm-hmm. They're at the 8-8 Ravens, who somehow through weird tiebreakers and such, the Ravens still have a chance to make the playoffs. What we don't know is if Lamar Jackson has a chance to be in this game or not, or if we're still messing with Huntley. Now, the Ravens are 5-point home favorites here. And either way, I feel like I want the Steelers in the points. Is that weird?
It's not weird, right? For me, it just comes down to what this number actually means. And this number does signify to me that Lamar Jackson is going to be back. Because as you know, you bust the ratings out, and we've had enough sort of sample size here of what the rating should be when it comes to Tyler Huntley, right? This number would be pick'em if it were Tyler Huntley. right? That's the Tyler Huntley rating, as we've seen from them being 7-point underdogs to the Rams, which was crazy last week. And I was all over grabbing that number once it got as high as it did. And that's the sort of unfortunate part about this podcast and any sort of content that gets sort of produced throughout the week, because this day and age, the lines change and they get a little crazy on Sunday, and you have to take advantage of that. And that's why we talk about this stuff when it comes to what Huntley's rating should be versus what Lamar's rating should be and all of that sort of thing. And so we've already seen that Huntley, exists in this universe of, well, maybe the Ravens are a below average team, because he would have to be a below average team to be a 7-point home underdog to a team that's good, like the Rams, but not necessarily like amazing. And so now that we see this number and it opened 3.5 and it ticked up and up and up, and that 3.5 number was the standard, maybe Lamar plays, maybe he doesn't, sort of halfway number that we have seen basically every week. And now we see it tick up. And it isn't because like people are coming in and slamming the Ravens. It's more Lamar's starting to look a little bit more likely to play, right? And so my number's 5.8 when it comes to Lamar playing in this game. So we went from 5.5 up into some 6s. The content, we always sort of talk about the predictive nature of the big contest lines in Las Vegas, sort of predicting where the line's going to be come Saturday. They have this game at 6. That tells me that they think / know that Lamar is going to play in this game. And so I just look at the Steelers and I go, it couldn't have been set up any better for the Steelers on Monday. And we'll talk here about the Browns coming up here, because I think the Browns are weirdly one of the more interesting games this week. I'm not super sure the Browns are trying all that hard to win that game on Monday. And we'll get there. Sure. And it's still like was the struggle for large Benjamin. And so I think they could get blown out here by the Ravens, right? And so like I get the idea of like, well, I'm going to take the Steelers plus whatever, because the rating that we've seen the Ravens at, right? We have seen them as 7-point underdogs, as 7-point underdogs, to the Bengals, then to the Rams and all of that sort of thing. But it's like Lamar Jackson, if he's able to play, and listen, why would you play in this game if you're not able to play? Right. And so this is definitely a wait and see approach, because I think right now you're getting the Ravens at the correct number for Lamar playing. So if you make the bet now and Lamar doesn't play, well, now you're just out of luck, right? But if you wait until Sunday, you at least get the backup plan of, well, if Huntley plays, okay, the number is going to adjust. It's going to crash back down towards Pick'em. So why would we make this bet right now? Right. And so that's why I think this line is moving on sort of information. It's not moving because people are dying to lay points here with the Ravens just yet, because in bettors' minds, there's uncertainty. Maybe in the books' minds, there's a little less uncertainty when it comes to whether Lamar is going to play. So let's wait for a little certainty on our end. This number is not going to go through 6 up to 7 right now. It is. And if it does, by the way, and if it goes to 7.5, then absolutely take the Steelers there. That's fine by me. I just think this right now is a Lamar Jackson number. And if he plays, it's like, that's the correct number. So we'll just have to wait and see if that ends up being the case.
It's almost like the true definition of the Vegas zone, right?
Yeah.
But let's go on. 11-5 Titans are 10-point favorites at the 4-12 Texans. First things first, I'm stunned that the Texans have won 4 games this season. Move that aside for a sec. Tennessee needs to win this game, as they're still, obviously trying to get the number 1 overall seed. And again, much like the Chiefs game, I'm going to ask, does that mean that they should be double-digit favorites on the road? I say yes.
Oh, okay.
What say you?
I say no. Yeah, so you're saying that you're shocked that the Texans have won 4 games. I'm appalled that the Texans have won 4 games, right? So we can be shocked and appalled here together. That being said, this number is too high, and this number is too high for the same reasons that a lot of these other numbers are too high. The difference here is that I actually do, and I'm going to use the word trust here, which is just an absolute mistake. I trust the Texans to have effort in this game, to not be 1-2-3 Cancooning. This is a bad football team. This is a team that has a bad secondary. Well, that's not necessarily the worst matchup then for the Titans, right? Like having a bad secondary is going to go a lot worse for a lot other teams. And so Honestly, I felt like the Texans probably should have won that game last week against the 49ers. I know the score and the box score doesn't necessarily reflect that, right? But if they had done even just sort of the smallest things, that they would have given themselves at least a chance to win that game late. We've seen the Texans, listen, it was a fluky game, rain, turnovers, all of that stuff. We have seen them beat the Titans before. I'm not saying they're going to win this game. I'm just saying that this number, should be closer to 9. This number was 10 back in Tennessee, a month, 6 weeks ago. So now that it's flipped and the number is going to be the same, where does that extra, couple of points come from? That's coming from an overreaction here. So yeah, listen, the Titans could win this game. They could do so relatively comfortably. I'm just telling you, 10.5, we might see 11s here. We might even see something higher than that come Sunday if everybody just sort of buys into the concept of the must-win situation. I am going to be on the Texans. It's one of my better bets this week because, again, I just think the line doesn't really make a ton of sense. And I think Houston still has that scrap left in them to actually try, which when it comes to week 18, some of that is a half the battle situation.
Speaking of teams trying, so to speak, you got the 12-4 Bucs, who are at home and favored by 8 points against the Panthers, who I'm not really sure where they're at. I guess maybe Sam Darnold should still be trying because he's trying to maintain a starting job for next year.
Right.
But we'll see. I don't know. I feel like there's a couple different ways to read this game. The Bucs obviously are still dealing with a lot of injuries, and you want to get healthy for the playoffs, which is most important than seeding at this point, I'd say. But also, do they just need a really good performance to kind of remove the distraction of what's going on with Antonio Brown? And I know that's not what we do here in dealing with the narratives and all that, but this kind of seems like a very crazy situation that they've been dealing with for this past year. And one way to get rid of some of that narrative and talk is to go out and just dominate. I'm not saying that they wouldn't want to do that anyways, but I'm saying Tommy might be trying to make a point here and saying, hey, we need to tighten up. Is the 8 points too many?
The 8 points is a weird one, first and foremost, right? Because this number should be 14.5, right? If this was the sort of full scale, everybody all hands on deck, 60 minutes of effort, blah, 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 blah version of the Buccaneers, right? Because think about it this way, right? We've seen them play the Falcons, and the Falcons are a better football team than this version of the Carolina Panthers right now. And the Buccaneers were 13-point favorites and 11-point favorites on the road to the Falcons. So why is this 8.5? And I think you're sort of onto the right track, but I would sort of take it in a different way here. I think it's less mental that the Bucs want to have a good showing here, however long that ends up sort of manifesting itself on Sunday.
Yeah,
because I think it's a physical thing. I think it's literally we don't have our pieces. We have Cyril Grayson out there who sounds like a name that Antonio Brown would make up if he was just going to still show up and put a different jersey back on and be out there, because Cyril Grayson catches that touchdown pass. I'm like, that guy looks a lot like Antonio Brown. Right.
I was just that's not a real person. When I was watching the game, I was like, who did he just throw that to? I'm like, who is that guy? That's not that's beyond can you play who he played for during an actual game? Right.
And I'm sitting there going giving credit Antonio Brown for not coming back, with the name Santonio Schmown and playing in a football game, right? Kudos to him to have a more creative made up name as Cyril Grayson. I'm sure he checks into hotels using that name. The point is this is sort of it matters because of, you mentioned, the seeding, right? But as long as Tampa Bay is not going to be the 4 seed, then it kind of doesn't really matter whether you're the second and third.
Exactly.
I guess you rather be at home for that second round game, theoretically. But by the way, what if the Cowboys lose to the Eagles, right? And then it really, now there's absolutely no chance that you're getting caught by the Cowboys. And who knows what's going to necessarily happen in that NFC West jumble that we're still, yet to talk about. So that's why I think you have this line where it's Tom Brady is going to play in this game, but he is going to play with kind of one hand tied behind his back, if you will. And there's also a backdoor element to this, right? So if Tampa Bay is 14.5-point favorites and they have a 3-touchdown lead in the fourth quarter, well, Tom Brady's coming out of that game, right?
Sure.
He will have done enough through 2.5 quarters, maybe 3 quarters, to sort of, do what he needed to do, like we just mentioned. And you're sitting there with Carolina, and this is another just like a really prime example in theory of, okay, if Tampa Bay's up 3 touchdowns here, let's get a live bet here in on Carolina. Now, if it's 14.5 points in the first place, you're going to get a backdoor cover here with Carolina. Yeah. But if it's 8.5, right, and they're down 21, 17 points late, and Carolina's the last team to score, speaking of a last team to score type bet, maybe that's the prop. Then Carolina's probably going to get that last score, and they're going to get inside that number. And so when you make the number 8.5 here, you're sort of preventing that concept. Right now, again, we talked about it on Tuesday. If this is the Blaine Gabbert for 60 minutes, then the number has to come down even further than just 8.5. This has to come down to another type of a game like Green Bay, Detroit, which we'll talk about too. So yeah, we're sort of half in the middle here, but these half in the middle type games scream live betting opportunity, right? And doing so, and if you can get it a drive before Tom Brady comes out so that the algorithms and the people sort of monitoring this stuff don't catch up in time, then that's why you have to have all these games on. That's why you have to have all the apps open here to jump on top of these, because in some cases, some apps, some sports books will be a little bit slower than others. And you'll see a live plus 10.5 in one spot, and you'll see where there's a plus 13.5 in another spot. That won't last all that long, but that gives you an opportunity there to sort of buy yourself an extra unit here or there, right? And on an NFL Sunday, getting yourself an extra unit here or there is the name of the game.
Totally got you. The name of the game for me also is picking and choosing when the hook will matter to me and when it won't. This game, you got the Saints as 3.5 point favorites at Atlanta and the Falcons. And I sigh because the Falcons this whole entire season, I have no idea what to make of them. I feel like the Saints, at least there's some, to be like, I think I kind of know what I'm getting here. The Falcons, I have no idea. So I'm looking at this game here and I'm just saying, like, in theory, I should take the points, but I don't know, like, is there a theory with the Falcons? You know what I mean?
Right. The theory for me on the Falcons is they are actually reliable, but they are reliable in that they are a 3-quarter football team, right? And there's sort of good teams, bad teams, and then there are teams that can only hang for 3 quarters with the quote unquote good football teams. And 3 quarters might be enough against the Detroit Lions. It might be enough against the Jacksonville Jaguars. Go on down the line, Jets, Dolphins, whomever. This isn't a team, though, in the Saints that is one of those teams that, is good, let's just say, right? Because we know, like you said, we know we're getting with the Saints here. So I know from a rating standpoint, I like my rating of the Falcons, right? They're always hovering around the point spread. Unfortunately, in big point spread games, they get a little bit loose in the fourth quarter because they're down 7 or they're down 10, and that turns into 2 touchdowns awfully quickly, or they do stuff like Matt Ryan diving too soon at the end zone that cost them, a full-scale cover last week if you add plus 14. The Saints are this team, right? They just grind it out as long as Ian Book isn't going to start. Like, they are a standard team, not that substandard, but they're, 45 out of 100. And the Falcons are about a 40, maybe a 38 out of 100 as well. And so if we know that going in, and we know that the Falcons, where it's going to fall apart for the Falcons is in the fourth quarter against a good team, but they are not necessarily playing a good team, that's going to matter a little bit less. And so when we take those 2 ratings and we smush them together and we put Atlanta at home, I mean, I personally have this game as a pick 'em. The sort of market rating where point spreads have been over the last few weeks has this as about a 2.5 point Saints favorite type situation. Nobody's got this at 4.5. Right? This is just like, no one has this at 4.5. I expect this to fall. I think this game actually ends up closing at 3 or sort of 3 adjacent with maybe some juice on either side. Wouldn't be shocked if it went through 3, but 3 is such a key number that actually sort of, would be a little bit strange. So to me, this is, grabbed it already, grab it again, grab the Falcons plus 4.5. This is going to be 2 evenly matched teams. both teams are going to care, right? The Falcons are going to care in this game. The Saints need the game, but this is the need tax. This is the best example all week of the need tax that's getting deployed here, with the Saints ever being 4.5-point favorites here. No, this is Falcons. This is one of my better bets. This is contest. This is everything. Again, we're going down with the ship here with the Falcons. And what might be Matt Ryan's last game as a Falcon, which is sort of going under the radar since we just did a whole, Ben Roethlisberger thing for 4 hours. And Ben Roethlisberger right now isn't half the quarterback that Matt Ryan is. And that's saying something, considering we don't really think all that much of Matt Ryan at this point.
Well, a lot of people don't really think much about the Jets, but I will say, as I look at them as 16-point underdogs in Buffalo, to me, that's a lot of points, because I'll at least give the Jets the fact that they're spicy. Down the stretch, They've been spicy. 16 points seems like way too many points for me. I say the Bills win, but I like the Jets to cover the 16 points.
Yeah, it's, pretty simple here. Like, this number, it's a little bit too high. It's not crazy, but I think, this number was 17. And so somebody out there said, yeah, that's a little too high. And the money came in on the Jets and knocked it down to 16, which is probably a more appropriate number, right? And so it's like, sportsbooks tried to build in the Bills tax here, right, by making them a point and a half too high. And then when it comes to the Jags, we're all like, nope, not doing it, right? Like, not going there with the Jags. A couple of these other teams, maybe not, Denver, not going there with Denver. People were willing to go there with the Jets because, they have shown some effort here in these last few games. And yes, the Bills, quote unquote, need to or would like to. There's, as we talked about, there's a difference between need and like, right? Yep. Your survival or your seeding. Like, there's a bit of a difference there. There's a decent chance the Bills look up and the Titans are blowing out the Texans, even though I don't necessarily think that's going to be the case. And they don't have to necessarily do anything in the fourth quarter. And by the way, they don't have to win, to get the, move up in the seeding. They don't have to win by 18 points, right? That's not the requirement here. The requirement here for the Bills is to just win the football game. So I agree with you. I think, the Jets are probably a decent play here. This might be another one where you wait, right? Because think about all these teams that sort of would like to win in theory, their best effort is going to be in the first quarter. So like, if you want the Jets, okay, take them at plus 16. But if you just wait and maybe there's an early touchdown from the Bills, which a lot of the times there is, and maybe there's an early 2 touchdowns from the Bills, you're going to get 17.5, 21.5, because the thing is, whether it's just the algorithms that are working on these sports books or whether it's actual physical odds makers who are trying to figure out when these quarterbacks are going to come out of a game and watching, sort of multiple games at once and seeing what's going to necessarily happen and trying to bake a play off of that. Like, even if Josh Allen plays in this game and you can get yourself a plus 21.5 because the Bills score first, like, that would be the way I would play it, right? Like, isn't that sort of, a more beneficial sort of concept? Maybe the Jets end up scoring first and you never get that opportunity to bet on the Bills. Maybe you just split a unit, Jets early, Jets before the game at plus 16, and then wait for the other half to kind of come in, right? There's a bunch of different ways. A lot of finesse, basically, in this week 18 to sort of make some of these bets, which, if you absolutely have to make them pre-flop, so to speak, it can be challenging, but there is ways to work around that. And I think that's what we've got a lot of the time here in week 18.
No, I got you. As we keep week 18 rolling, what could be Russell Wilson, I was about to say Russell Westbrook for some reason, but what could be Russell Wilson's final game with the Seahawks. They're in Arizona taking on the Cards. The Cards are 6.5-point favorites. Same thing with the Cards in terms of seeding. That's kind of what we're talking about here in terms of why this game matters for them. Just mentioned, I guess, why the game might matter for the Seahawks, depending on what you think Russ might have in his swan song here. Yeah. I don't know what to make of this, because the Seahawks have been such a weird team that I don't know. Like, even if they are trying, I don't know what that's worth here. Right. So the Cards at under a touchdown, sure, I guess I'll lean Cards here, but I don't like it.
Yeah, I want to bet Seattle here I want to bet him so badly, but I need to know sort of who's in the lineup and who's out of the lineup and all of that sort of thing, right? And as much as we talk about Russell Wilson, because he's obviously going to get the headlines here, Bobby Wagner is questionable for this game. And I don't know why necessarily a guy who's probably headed for offseason surgery would want to play in this game. And if he is not in this game, then the Cardinals can feast a little bit here in a game that they need a little bit more of. And I think a lot of times in history, you'll sort of, see the last couple of weeks of the season, you'll be like, oh, this team's trying really hard. Like, and you'll, in the case of the Seahawks, right? Like they've won a couple of games. Obviously they lost that game to the Bears. Be like, oh yeah, like I expect a full effort out of them. And then all of a sudden, like the last game's a road game and maybe it's in a nice destination. Maybe it's in a warm climate destination. Maybe it's in a spot that has some places where you can go, right? A little Scottsdale type of situation. And then you're sitting there watching a game and going, this team just does not care about this game. And they didn't need to 1-2-3 Cancun it because they could just 1-2-3 Scottsdale it before the game even started. Or maybe they're just thinking about the after the game stuff, right? And so that's the thing. Like I'm probably going to end up sort of not taking the Seahawks in a way that I normally would if this game was, pretty much literally any other time of the season. I think another one that's just probably a live bet type of a game, right? Where if it looks like Seattle is engaged in this game, maybe they score first, maybe this game's close. And we're still working off of, again, with this live betting stuff, everything's working off of the opening spread, right? So you go into a game, if a team's 14.5 points, we're working off of that theory. When a game is a 3-point spread or a pick 'em, we are working off of that theory throughout the rest of the game. And the key is to jump in before the algorithm gets reprogrammed halfway through or midway through the game to sort of indicate, oh, this isn't really a 14.5 point spread game. This is now a 3.5 point spread game because one team just took out their quarterback or one team doesn't care or blah, 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 right? So this is just another one of those games in that category. It's too bad. I would have liked to take Seattle. Maybe if it gets up to 7, again, this is one of those problems, right? If it gets up to 7, that probably is an indicator that maybe, certainly Wagner doesn't necessarily play. We know DK Metcalf seems to be headed for offseason surgery as well. And again, when you're not playing at home, you got to win last week. They sort of had their little holiday party, if you will, right? By trouncing Detroit. It's going to be a different story this week against the Cardinals. Again, they need to win the game. Obviously, that's sort of built into the line that I would have normally made 4.5. But if Seattle just doesn't care, I don't know if those 2 points are really going to make that much of a difference.
Yeah, no, super interesting stuff for sure. One game that we kind of touched on earlier inadvertently, but now it's time to discuss. Cleveland Browns, who are at home to the Bengals, and the Browns are favored by 6 points. Now, that tells me that we assume the Bengals are not going to play anybody or they don't really have much to play for. Joe Burrow, as we know, at the end of last game was pretty banged up. So why would you play them in this game? There's lots of interesting factors there. But the thing that's most interesting to me that you touched on earlier was about what we saw last week from the Cleveland Browns and more so Baker Mayfield, who was put in a position to throw a lot of passes, which if we know on our couch, that's not the way the Browns try to win. Why did that happen last week? And you kind of alluded to, were the Browns trying to win that game last week? Or were they trying to be like, well, let's see what you got, Baker. Earn your contract for next year, Baker. I don't know. But either way, I'll say this. So the line is 6. Case Keenum's in, which makes me actually like the Browns more, which we've also discussed for a lot of the season. So there's just a lot of narratives going on with this game, but I'll leave it there with you.
I am obsessed with this game. I love this game. I hate this game all in one. I hate it because, again, file this under the category of Matt Russell's an idiot. I stared at this game. I put out a Twitter poll this week asking, if you were the Cincinnati Bengals, which route would you rather have? Would you rather have the host the Patriots and then play the Titans route? Or would you rather have the, we've got to play, we have to go to Kansas City or Buffalo after round 2, right? And we host a team that is still pretty good. Maybe it's, again, could be the Patriots, could be, the Chargers, could be something, any one of those teams that could fall in that sort of different zone, right? So why would you want to be in the 2 seed? Why would you want to be in the 3 seed? Obviously the theory is, they're still alive for the 1 seed, but they need literally all of the teams in front of them to lose, which like isn't going to happen, right? So, I think kind of the best case scenario looking at these games are like, yeah, the Titans might lose, but like the Chiefs aren't going to. And if they do, by the way, like we'll know that on Saturday night, we'll know that before Sunday even rolls around. And so This line opened, it was -3 before the game on Monday. And then it kind of ticked down to -2.5 when you and I talked on Tuesday. And then it flips over to Cincinnati -3. And that was the thing that sort of like got me sort of going, wait, what? Like, I realized that maybe Cincinnati should be favored if both these teams are sort of playing normally. I don't even know if that's necessarily true, right? Like this team, again, Cleveland, that again, we've talked about all season long, has sort of slowly fallen down the ratings. I still have them at like a 56. And I still don't have the Bengals higher than like a 59 or a 60. And I know like everybody's going nuts over Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase right now. But the reality is there just isn't that much between these two teams, with the exception of a healthy quarterback, right? Like and listen, we saw the Browns absolutely trounce Cincinnati in Cincinnati. So if you're sitting there going like, this guy's a fool, I'm not a fool because I think that these teams are relatively close. I'm a fool because I didn't take +3 with the Browns when I knew that Cincinnati wasn't going to try to win this game. Like, I'm sending out Twitter polls going like, am I crazy? And of course, like 80% of the responders are like, yeah, I would much rather play the Titans in that second round game than have to deal with what the path might have to be if Cincinnati grabbed the second or third seed by winning this game. And again, not that was necessarily a guarantee, because obviously these other teams are probably going to win as well. But so the long road that we go to here, right, is that we see Cleveland and they, like you said, they're playing Case Keenum, and that's what made the line move to Cincinnati -3 from Cleveland -2.5. I'm like, that can't possibly be a 5.5 point adjustment because Case Keenum's in the lineup. Like, that's insane. But you're right. Like, the Browns weren't trying to win that game on Monday, right? Like it was funny because you would see early on, and I was on the Steelers, so like I was sort of sensitive to it, but like you would see Nick Chubb like gash the Steelers on the rare instances where he would actually get a chance to run the football, and you'd be like, yeah, that looks a lot like Dalvin Cook from 2 weeks ago, right? That looks a lot like some of these other running backs that have taken advantage of a bad Steelers defense. And this isn't the team that like loves throwing the football in the Cleveland Browns, right? Like, this is a completely out of characteristic move for them to decide to throw the football a ton in a game that they could have just handed the ball to Nick Chubb and won that game. And so you say, well, why do they need to lose? It's not like they're tanking for the first pick or anything like that. The AFC North is such a jumbled mess that if the Browns lose their last 2 games, they will finish 4th in the division. And if you're not going to make the playoffs in the NFL, you might as well finish 4th in the division. Why? Because of the way the schedule works in the NFL. Because if you finish wherever you finish in your division, that means the matchups that you're getting for the next year in the other divisions sort of equate to your positioning. So when you're finishing dead last in a division like the AFC North, that means you get Jacksonville next year. That means you get the Jets next year. That means you get Denver next year. Whereas if you finish in 2nd or 3rd because you get a little loose and you win, you beat the Steelers and you beat the Bengals down the stretch, now all of a sudden you finish 2nd, which didn't get you anything because you didn't make the playoffs, but it did get you the Chargers. It got you the Patriots. It got you the Colts, right? Which group of 3 teams? Like, forget about playoff matchups. Which group of 3 would you rather play next season when you are looking to next season as potentially being a good football team next season? Because you were a good football team last season, and up until Baker Mayfield got hurt, you were probably a pretty good team this season. So Kevin Stefanski, I don't think he just became a moron overnight and just decided, hey, let's throw the ball a ton with Baker Mayfield because that's going to be the best way. I think, honestly, I kind of think he threw him out there almost like, hey, man, like, you're already hurt. If TJ Watt destroys you in this game, not the worst thing that's ever happened. We get to, maybe some decisions get a little bit easier, something along those lines. I know that's sort of a very sort of sketchy, like, mean way to kind of look at it. But, like, how do you not run the ball with Dearness Johnson and Nick Chubb over and over and over against the Steelers? How?
But also, but kind of along those same lines, though, right? I look at it more so as we have a decision to make. Are we going to pay Baker Mayfield a lot of money going forward? And I know that it's not necessarily the decision that needs to be made like at this moment, but it is kind of like, let's see what we got here. two birds, one stone, let's see how this plays out.
I get that. And I think that's a very easy sort of way to sell it too, if you were sort of called out for that. So, you know what I mean? Like, oh, let's see what we've got with Baker. Whereas Baker, and he comes out and he says this week, he's like, I'm talking to my agent, I'm talking to my family. Like, it doesn't make any sense for me to play in this game because like, I know what you're doing. You're sending me out there compromised so that you don't have to pay me as much, or so that you can sort of have this out, if you will, to not pay me, right? And so he goes like, it's been a bad business decision for Baker to play this whole season ever since he got hurt.
And I think that's on him. And I know I don't want to get I don't want to get too far down this rabbit hole.
No, of course. And it's absolutely on him and all of that sort of thing. Like, he had to have made that decision early on, but he's trying to be a good teammate and play. And he's also trying to bet on himself, right? Because we're a bet on himself culture at this point. And listen, I am a product of that as well. And so I'm not going to slander that. But like, when you're betting on yourself, but you're doing so with almost literally one arm tied behind your back, or at least tied to your side, like, that's not really a great business decision there. So he opts out, if you will, of this last game. But then Cincinnati sits there and they go like, well, we don't really care about this game either. So like, we're not going to play Burrow. And I bet you they tested the bleep out of Joe Mixon to sort of dig up a COVID positive out of him and maybe some other guys here down over the next week or so, just so long as they'll be available for next week. And so basically here, Cleveland with Case Keenum, if they are trying, which again, we'll see how many people are available. Obviously, Mayfield's not one of them. They would be a 56. But at what number do you make Cincinnati if they are, using our guy, the black sheep Allen brother, right? Like the Allen brother by name only. Because without Burrow, with Burrow, my number's 58. Without him, what kind of a team are the Bengals? Are the Bengals the Falcons at like a 36? Are they the Bears at like a 33? Let's say we find some number kind of in between. And it's like, we say that this version of the Bengals is a 35. Well, then the Browns should be a 7.5 point favorite against that type of a team. So this -6 that exists right now sort of tells you that the Bengals are going to play to like a 41, right? Just from a pure mathematical standpoint. Are the Bengals going to be better or worse than a 41? Are the Browns going to be better or worse than their normal rating? I don't know the answer to either of those questions, right? You could tell me that the Browns in a home game, their last game of the year with Case Keenum, who is still trying to get paid, like trying to stay in the league, that he plays well in this last game and they win this game comfortably. And they say sort of, kind of give a screw you to the organization trying to quote unquote lose this game. But they might end up losing this game anyway, but they might end up winning this game and still finish last in the division, depending on what happens elsewhere. So again, I wish I had the +3. The only thing that I did well this past week was take the +8.5 on the teaser when it was 2.5. But honestly, other than that, like, this game is more interesting to talk about than it is to bet on. But again, another live betting opportunity when you see what Cincinnati rolls out there. But you just need to know why the line is where it is and where it could have gone, where it could be, and where it should be if you think that the Bengals are truly going to just kind of run it out there, barely trying, which kind of seems like the case here, right? So I don't know that you can bet the Bengals, but you need to know that the Browns have reason to lose this game in the same way that they had reason to lose it on Monday, and they succeeded.
Fair enough. Let's get to some games that, let's be honest, I don't really think matters to either team, kind of just playing out the string here in week 18. So first up, we got the Bears at the Vikings. Vikings are 5.5 point favorites, and Vikings at home have been a thing, but it's kind of like, well, how do they play this out down the stretch? You got Matt Nagy, who I don't even know how he still has a job. But then you also have on the other side, Kirk Cousins, we know, missed last week.
Yeah.
What's going on there with the Vikings? And just it's in the Vegas zone for a reason at the 5.5. And normally I would lean to take the points in the Vegas zone, but here I actually think I might take the Vikings.
I don't hate that because I think you are in theory getting value with the Vikings because this line should be 8. right? Like I have the Vikings when they're playing full strength at about a 53, right? They have been this frustrating team that you could have absolutely talked me into being capable of being in the 60s, being a team competing in the playoffs, but they also at no point have been bad, right? They have never been, other than sort of last week when they might have been 1-2-3 Cancooning it or more, get me out of the cold in Green Bay. But no, you're right. Now they get, not Thielen, obviously, but they get Kirk Cousins back here. And so how close to sort of the standard rating that we have right now for the Vikings are they going to play at? Because if they played at that normal rating, yeah, they should be a 7 to an 8-point favorite. We saw, again, this is before the entire Bears secondary got popped with COVID and all of that sort of thing. But that Monday night game, you'll recall, right, where the Vikings were a 7-point road favorite. That game opened 4. Right. So if you take, okay, they were 4 there, flip it, 1.5 for either side on home field advantage, that becomes 7. So this number should probably be 7. It's not 7 right now. In fact, it opened 2.5. Now that was when we thought that maybe Kirk Cousins wasn't going to be able to play and all of that sort of thing. Now, of course, Justin Fields gets popped with COVID because you just have to have your head on a swivel when it comes to this stuff, because we went from maybe it's Justin Fields against Sean Mannion. And no, now it's actually Kirk Cousins against Andy Dalton, Nick Foles. What are we supposed to make out of this? Fundamentally here, though, the reason this isn't 7 is because why aren't the Vikings necessarily a 1-2-3 Cancun candidate? Right. We've talked about the Bears that they're doing their Peloton work. They got, a couple wins down the stretch here, maybe showing like they're doing something. And can they sustain that in the future? Well, who knows? Right. We'll see what they do with Matt Nagy. But the point is they're trying, and they haven't needed to try over the last couple of weeks. And all we've seen from the Vikings, once they stopped needing to try, they kind of stopped trying. And so, we're seeing this line tick up. I imagine there's some room to go because if all sort of hands are on deck with the Vikings, there's no reason why this number couldn't be pushed to 6, 6.5, and maybe even 7, at which point I would then take the Bears, because who are the Vikings to deserve to be laying points to anybody, right? Let alone a team that might actually be trying in this game. So I'm looking to bet the Bears here. I'm looking to bet the Bears on the money line as well, because I think, again, if there's a lot of uncertainty, what's our rule for the last 3 weeks of the season? If neither team cares and one team is favored by a touchdown sort of significantly, let's just take the points. Let's try it on the money line and see what happens. To me, this is not that much of a different situation than the Bears going to Seattle a couple of weeks ago. And that worked out for us on the money line as well. So I'm going to do a little bit of both when it comes to the Bears here, but I'm going to wait and see because again, we're rooting this in our math, in our ratings and all of that stuff. I know there's a possibility that this line gets to 7. So that's why I'm going to wait. If my number said 5, 5.5, I'd just bet it now. It wouldn't be that big of a deal. But because I know that there is a space out there where the line goes up, that's why I know I can wait and get a better number here potentially with the Bears.
Speaking of numbers, I'm kind of interested as to why this number is 3.5 points, is the Packers are road favorites in Detroit. This is just an interesting line to me, and I'm trying to figure it out. I don't really get it. Can you shed some light here for me?
Well, I can shed light on one thing. And what's the theme of this show? I'm an idiot, because I saw this number. It got down to 2.5 for the Packers. And I'm like, is it going to go further? Are we one Aaron Rodgers announcement away from the Lions being favored in this game, for being a pick'em in this game? Because Aaron Rodgers not playing is one thing, because this line, frankly, should be 14. This is very much sort of Carolina and Tampa Bay, where this line should be 14, something close like that, especially with Jared Goff not playing for the Lions. And so with Goff not playing for the Lions, and you get, the random quarterback who, again, I couldn't pick out of a lineup, and he ends up playing. And now just because Aaron Rodgers is out, that means this line should be 2.5. I was like, that doesn't make any sense. But if people are sort of on that vibe before Aaron Rodgers even announces anything, maybe he announces that he's not going to play in this game, and we get this game as a pick. Didn't happen, hasn't happened. Brutal. And again, when these things happen, right? Like, why did we have to know that Joe Burrow on, what was it, Tuesday or Wednesday? Why did we have to know that he's not going to play? We couldn't have waited, and I could have, eventually made my Cleveland +3 bet, got my head out of my butt to be able to do that. No, couldn't do that. But instead, we got to play yes or no here when it comes to Aaron Rodgers. Now this line is kicked up 3.5, 4. There's some 4.5 out there. Basically, we just are trying to figure out how much is Aaron Rodgers going to play, because it's different from like a Tom Brady or even a Josh Allen, where it's like, yeah, we need this game a little bit. We do just need to win this game, but we also play next week. And if we could get our guy out as soon as possible, that would be great for that purpose. Well, the Packers already have that week off next week. They are the only team that knows that they have a week off going into this week. So I get why they would want to play Aaron Rodgers a little bit, sort of treat it like that third preseason game. Let's have him go out there and play a quarter, maybe two. And what does that mean as far as the Packers are concerned, right? And so whether Rodgers plays or not, the rest of the Packers are going to have to play. They're not going to just have 50 backups come in like off of the street. They're going to have other starters playing in that game. And so, it's Jordan Love on the road against Kansas City. That's what we've seen so far from him. On the road against Detroit might look a little bit better, right? Especially if you're working the run game, maybe AJ Dillon gets 30 carries, something along those lines, right? Because again, somebody has to play. So whether it was Jordan Love or a little bit of Aaron Rodgers, I should have grabbed the -2.5, right? Because I think the Packers are good value in either instance. Now it's up to 4.5, and now we have to do the live betting game, right? Where we have to now see whether Aaron Rodgers is going to play. Maybe you get a little bit now on the Packers, and then you sort of try to middle it with the Lions when, after the Packers take a lead, because Aaron Rodgers comes in, he throws a touchdown or two. Adding into all of this, the Packers haven't been a particularly good first quarter team this year. Yeah, they haven't, right? Even last week, they win 30-10, and it was 3-0 after the first quarter. You can go on every single game that they've played. They have barely covered or have not covered the first quarter line in virtually every game this season. So if the expectation is the Packers just going to go out there and they're going to light it up in the first quarter, that goes against everything that's happened all season long. And so I don't know that there's going to be a situation where it's like, oh yeah, Packers, boom, touchdown, get them out of the game. Because they haven't done that yet this season. Now, maybe they do because there's a little extra urgency and all of that sort of thing. But again, this is one where if this gets below 3, or if Rodgers announces that he's out and it gets below 3, I would take the Packers with Jordan Love. But until we sort of find out otherwise, this is one that needs to be sort of live bet here, on the understanding that I think the Packers can win this game, even if Aaron Rodgers doesn't play, or if he only plays a little bit or whatever. But if we're somehow getting 14 because Rodgers starts and they score early, then yeah, the Lions are way more likely to play a 60-minute game here than the Packers are.
Yeah, I find it super interesting. And I definitely see the scenario where Aaron Rodgers plays, maybe tries to pad his stats a little, solidify that MVP. I could see that a lot. One thing I can't really see is if Joe Judge is back. Like, I don't get how that's a possibility at all, despite whatever's been put out into the news. But after his epic speech last week, did that motivate or help the Giants book their trips to Cabo? The Giants at home are 7-point underdogs to the Washington football team. And again, like, this is a scenario where this is middle of the season. Cool. I'm on the Giants. Give me the points. But there's no chance that I could take the Giants in this scenario. Is there?
No, you're right. Like, this is the line. You look at it and you go like, what? Washington is favored on the road by 6.5 points. Wait, and it's going up. It's going up to 7. And they're just they're asking you, they're begging you, if you will, to take the Giants plus 7. Like, that's all you need to know right there. Right. Like, and it's not just that, like, they're bad. Right. This isn't just like the Texans where, Davis Mills is out there and they're trying to throw the football and all of that sort of thing. They're literally just trying to end the games here as fast as possible. They're handing the ball off on every play. Even if you wanted to sell yourself on the concept of Mike Glennon, professional quarterback, he's out of the league at this point, right? He's not coming back. Like, who's going to sign that guy next year? And so now we've got Jake Fromm and some other guy whose name I've never even heard of. And those guys are going to play. Meanwhile, Washington doesn't have anything to play for. They've talked about using the quote unquote young guys. By the way, for Washington, the young guys are pretty good, right? Like, the young guys might be their better players, right? The De'Ami Browns of the world might be the better players. They're not just going to give this game away, because for even all his denials about it, Joe Judge called them a clown organization last week in his press conference. You think, like, look at Ron Rivera. Do you think that's a guy who's just like, let's just see how things go here? No, like, that's a guy who saw that and is like, wow, Joe bleeping Judge is going to call my organization a clown organization. Think about the players, man. The players are smart. On any football team. I think they know Joe Judge doesn't know what he's doing. They know they listen to these rants probably on a daily basis. You think they're really buying in on what Joe Judge is saying? If you and I aren't buying in, and we don't have to run into 300-pound linemen all day long, do you really think that they are buying into what this snake oil salesman is trying to tell them? Come on. Absolutely not. They want out of this as fast as they possibly can too. This has 24-6 written all over it for Washington relatively easily. I know it's uncomfortable because the Washington football team laying 6.5, 7 points. Find a way to bet this game, tease it down to 1. There's plenty of different options out there to sort of be able to do that as well. Yeah, Washington here is and always has been the only choice here in what I'm calling the spite game for the Washington football team. I think they can absolutely put a bullet in Joe Judge, metaphorically speaking. And honestly, it might be better that they don't. They should probably just tank this game to keep Joe Judge in the division. But I don't even think Joe Judge can keep Joe Judge in the division here, even as much as he's trying to talk his way into keeping his job.
Fair enough. The next couple of games, though, are games that matter to both, as they have some serious playoff implications. We'll start here. The 12-4 Rams are 4.5-point favorites, hosting the San Francisco 49ers. We're still uncertain about Jimmy Garoppolo's status. And I will say, as a Niners fan, Trey Lance has me worried a lot. And as long as he's in the mix, I feel the need to lean the opposite way. But here's a problem. Yeah. 4.5 points in the Vegas zone, and the Niners own the Rams. I want to lean Niners, but I just can't with Trey Lance. I just can't do it.
Yeah. So, I mean, it depends what the number is, right? And I mean that both within this game and sort of big picture, right? Because we talked last week. If you want to be laying 2 touchdowns with San Francisco when Trey Lance is the quarterback, more power to you. Best of luck.
Congratulations.
Right? And and congratulations on getting, frankly, a fluky cover, because that's all that was last week, right? Tip your cap. You are 1-0, probably maybe lifetime in Trey Lance giving 2 touchdowns. I don't know if that's the case. I mean, listen, he may be very good down the line here, and 49ers may have some dynasty on their hands once he ends up getting good. But when it comes to this game, depends on what the number is from a micro standpoint, right? Like, this number is hovering. We should almost rename the Vegas zone, to take it away from Bill Simmons. We should rename it like the Trey Lance zone here, because like this number is literally 4 if it's Jimmy G and it's 6 if it's Trey Lance. Like, that's the difference here. Okay. And so this number hovering in between 4 and 6 all week is basically just an indicator of the news or the rumors around whether Jimmy G is going to start. So if he says, yeah, I think I'm pretty good, you watch the line go down closer to 4. When you go, well, Jimmy G, the hand's still pretty banged up, it starts veering closer to 6, right? So I want to know who the quarterback is, because I know that that's where we're going to be in between those 2 lines. Now, these games, the 2 games that really matter to both teams, are kind of the most boring ones this week, right? Because we just talked extensively about the uniqueness of week 18 and how all of these other games, sort of have these different factors. These 2 teams are just, we're going to roll it out there and play, and we're both trying as hard as we can. The only thing that changes is whether or not Jimmy G's in the lineup. And so my numbers make this 3.5 if it's Lance and 2.5 if it's Jimmy G. And so you're saying to yourself, maybe, wait, that's a 1-point difference, but you just said the market is a 2-point difference between 4 and 6. What's the difference here? The number of 3, the key number of 3, right? That key number of 3 is so valuable. It's almost worth double, right? It's worth more than just the 1 point. And so if Jimmy G plays in this game and he's healthy and all of that sort of thing, I have this game closer to pick 'em. I have it under 3 at 2.5. So I'm going to be betting on the 49ers in either case. I think there's value on the money line in either case. It just, it's a little bit like the Ravens, where it's like, well, if it's Lance, I need to be getting +6 and the subsequent money line that occurs with that. And if it's Jimmy G, I'm fine with not getting +6. I'm fine with getting anything over a field goal with Jimmy G and that requisite money line of +150, +160, something along those lines, right? So to me, again, we've obviously talked at length before about Shanahan sort of owning McVay in the past and all of that sort of thing, right? We had that Monday nighter where somehow, by the way, San Francisco was a home underdog back then, right? And like that never made any sense to us then. It was one of our bigger bets all season long. So yeah, I mean, this is San Francisco or nothing, but like with the Ravens in sort of the opposite way, of course, this being the underdog, the Ravens being the favorite. Let's find out who the quarterback is first and then make that play.
I love it. Makes a lot of sense to me, even as a Niners fan. Moving on, though, to the last game on the NFL sked this regular season. It's the Chargers and the Raiders. Both teams are at 9-7. Chargers are favored on the road by 3. One thing I need to know for the Raiders, is Waller going to actually play in this game? I would assume the answer is yes. But even with that said, I don't know. This is very tough. This is a tough one because obviously you're going to get both teams' best games. So it comes down to me, who would I rather be riding with in this game? And even though I'm laying the 3 points with the Chargers, I'd rather be riding with the Chargers. Reason being, just because of Herbert and your man Staley. I like their mentality in a must-win game. They are going to go out and try to win this game. Again, not that the Raiders aren't going to do that, but I'm saying I just trust. If I'm sitting there laying money, I would rather have my money on those guys as opposed to whoever the random schmo is that took over for John Gruden. Right. And I know the Raiders have been playing well down the stretch. I get all that. Totally understand that. No knock. I'm talking in a one game playoff. Let's go. I'm riding with the Chargers, and I'll even lay the 3 points.
Yeah. So I've already made a bet on this game. I grabbed the Chargers at -2.5 because my numbers make it 2.5. The market numbers, and again, when I say the market numbers, that means like where the closing lines have been for these teams and how the market has power rated these teams. And right then it's up to me to sort of adjust how I sort of see those teams relative.
Yeah.
For some reason, I have the Chargers rated lower all of a sudden, or maybe I have the Raiders higher all of a sudden than the market does, because the market rating for these teams is 3.5. And so you're actually still kind of getting a deal here with -3, but I understand why this line can't be 3.5 because Darren Waller is in theory coming back. And that obviously changes the last, handful of numbers on the closing line, right? If Darren Waller's back, well, then you have to make that adjustment. So I see now why this is 3. I think a lot of people, unfortunately, we sort of get into the space where we bet on things that we want to happen. I think a lot of people just want to see the Chargers make the playoffs and the Raiders not to besmirch the good name of your boy, Nick Bisaccia, I believe is his name. And by the way, if he wins this game, why is he not the coach of the year? Because what a disaster show he took over, and to drag them into the playoffs, it would be a minor miracle. But I think that's kind of the point, right? That this team would be sort of a minor miracle to get into the playoffs. Now, Vegas is going to be rocking. I don't love, obviously, that this is a road game for the Chargers. Probably be rocking, though, if it's in LA, right? We saw this on a Monday nighter a couple of, it was 2 or 3 months ago now. But that was a game that, the Raiders had the home field advantage when it came to the crowd. They would just always will. Most teams will when we're talking about the LA Chargers. So nothing really changes from a crowd noise standpoint there. So I have the 2.5. I'm probably going to stick with the 2.5. I'm not against people going like, I'll take the home dog +3 in a game that they have to win. But like you said, it comes down to decision-making, right? And I don't trust Derek Carr against a non-man-to-man defense, right? We talked about like, when's Derek Carr having the most success? It's against the Cowboys when they are, stupidly and foolishly just staying man-to-man the entire game. And Derek Carr can just pick up those blitzes. He can pick up the man-to-man coverage and just throw, deep shots and maybe get pass interferences, right? Like he's the new Joe Flacco when it comes to that sort of thing. What we saw in that Monday night game, the Chargers are like, that's not what we do, right? We do our zone defense. We keep everything in front of us. You cannot beat us deep. And so like, I don't really want to deal with Bisaccia and Carr in that situation. And I rather Herbert against a pretty still bad Raiders defense and Staley. Now, again, he's going to be doing the thing potentially where, well, it'd be interesting to just see where he goes with this. Is he going to be high risk? Does he believe that field goals will be enough in certain situations to beat this Raiders team the way that he believed that field goals were enough to beat the Broncos last week?
Yeah.
Or does he treat it like he's playing the Chiefs, like he's playing the Bills, like he's playing the Browns, thinking, oh man, we can't stop this team. We have to keep the ball. We have to go for it on fourth down. We have to put up 7s instead of 3s. I kind of think it's actually the former. I think he's probably going to play this relatively conservatively. And that's not a bad thing necessarily, right? That just means that he knows what game he's in. I think that game is, we're not going to get beat by Derek Carr here. They're not going to score a ton of points against us. And we can kind of play it a little bit more conservatively. The under might be a little bit interesting in a game where maybe both teams are kind of playing it close to the vest. The Raiders, because they're not allowed to sort of get loose, and because the Chargers are playing it a little closer to the vest because they can, knowing that they might just need 20 to 24 points to win this game. So a couple of different ways to play that game. That's just kind of how I see the decision-making from Staley and Herbert affecting this game. And I think you're right? Like one way or another, I think I trust them to make the better decisions than I do Derek Carr against his own defense and Nick Bisaccia. I don't know. Doesn't really matter. Don't know that we're going to see much of him very much in our future, though maybe in the playoffs, but hopefully not.
I mean, hopefully they at least cut him a check for just not having the season just fall off, right? Because it would have been so easy for the season to just go completely haywire. So cool, good story, Raiders. Cool for you, but yeah, your time's up. And I would probably say it's probably best to get in your numbers now on the Chargers, because I have the feeling that once the weekend goes as crazy as week 18 could go, there's going to be a lot of people hunting for that Sunday night game, trying to dump money on who we perceive to be the better team. So
yeah, great call. Great
opinion.
No,
just one man's opinion.
Really
but,
good point.
Hey, those are what we think our picks are for the week 18. Yeah. I mean, stay tuned for the line movement that could be happening as more information and news comes out. Right?
You're like, what
all
we
these
think.
Numbers could be changing.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, because as a Friday morning, right, it's like what we think, but then it's like, oh yeah, 11 players switch availability levels on Friday or Saturday, and then all of a sudden what we thought was not necessarily what we think anymore.
Totally. But if people want to keep up with you and find out more information as it happens and where you might be changing your leans here and there, where can the people do that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this Sunday is going to be key here. A couple of different things I got going on. First of all, the Twitter is, of course, at MRussAuthentic, MRUSS Authentic. On the old bird. A couple of things, right? So you have the Sunday night, you're going to have the playoff lines. Oh my God, playoff lines. Finally, like it's only mid-January, but we'll have playoff lines depending on the matchups. I'll try to sort of get out where I would grab a quick bet so that we're not coming here on Tuesday saying, oh yeah, you should have grabbed +6 when it was available. I'll try to tweet that out if those lines, obviously are popping come Sunday night. College basketball, my friend. We talked about it off the top. College basketball is back. Are we going to turn the music on? Can we get it on?
I think I already hear it, actually.
Is it?
I think I already hear it.
Oh, it's not. It wasn't coming through. Now there it is. Now it's coming through my earbuds. Buddy, the spreadsheets are cooking for the college basketball season. Here are my numbers for ranked games on Saturday. So ranked games on Saturday. I'll put out my picks as a whole on Saturday, ranked, non-ranked, et cetera. But it's Friday morning. We don't have lines for these games. I'm just going to tell you what my projections are, and you can work off of those. As usual, if they are off by a point or two, that's great news, because that means there's probably a bet in there somewhere, barring some sort of COVID unavailability, et cetera. Might have to do a little extra research when it comes to that. So let's get right into it. First game of the day, Wichita State and Houston. My projection is 16.5 points here for Houston. I do think that might be a little high, and if it ends up being 16.5, this is a situation where I'll tell you right now, I'll be on Wichita State plus the 16.5 if it is in fact that high. Purdue and Penn State, 10.5 is my projection for Purdue on the road here. Penn State can be physical. They can hang with Purdue a little bit down low. So that might make Penn State, an interesting plus 10.5 home underdog come Saturday. UConn and Seton Hall. My number is Hall -3. By the way, there's a Friday game that I'm interested in. Butler at plus 5.5 or better on Friday night, if that ends up existing out there. St. John's and Providence. I have Providence as a 6-point favorite there. No necessarily lean just yet in that game. Villanova and DePaul. I have Nova as an 8.5-point road favorite against DePaul there. So a bunch of Big East clashes there. We'll see where the lines shake down from that standpoint. Texas and Oklahoma State. My projections have Texas as a 4.5-point favorite on the road to Oklahoma State. Interesting there because Kansas was just a 6-point favorite on the road to Oklahoma State. So we'll see sort of where that shakes down in comparison to the Jayhawks, with obviously the Longhorns and the Jayhawks being two of the 3 or 4 best teams in the Big 12 this season. Michigan State and Michigan. I have Michigan as a 4-point home favorite. I can't wait to see where this line goes because Michigan has had a struggle so far this season, losing quite handily to Rutgers earlier on this week. Bama and Missouri. Missouri's coming off of a COVID break, right? That's always, who knows what's going to happen there, right? Bama 12-point road favorites to Missouri. Watch out for that one. Kansas and Texas Tech. I have Kansas as a 5-point favorite. Second road game in a row. Texas Tech just fought and clawed with Iowa State. Honestly, one of the crazier beats of the year if you had Iowa State. I'm not sure that you deserve to necessarily win if you had Iowa State, to be honest, but you didn't when our guy for Texas Tech sort of fumbled the ball up the court, threw up a prayer, banked it in, and turned a 7-point game into a 4-point game and a Texas Tech cover. If they're getting anybody back here, this is an absolute play on Texas Tech at home against Kansas. +5 is my number there on the projection. Colorado State and San Diego State, a big game in the Mountain West. I know you love your Mountain West basketball. I almost called it football. Colorado State at San Diego State. Again, it matters who's in the lineup for San Diego State. My projection is 3.5 there, though I am a little bit interested in Colorado State as an underdog there. Baylor and TCU. This might seem a little bit low, which is always a little bit dangerous, but I got Baylor as a 7.5-point road favorite against TCU. Just talked about Iowa State. I have them at Oklahoma. I have Oklahoma here as a 4.5-point favorite. And I know that's a little bit dicey because Iowa State has the ranking next to their name, right? But Oklahoma here, I think, is live to win this game and certainly have them as the favorite. Probably an opportunity for a bet there when it comes to the Sooners. Georgia and Kentucky, arguably the worst team in the SEC against arguably the best team. You know what that means, Shelley. It's a Kentucky -24-point spread projection there. Tread lightly who knows where that game could end up. Kentucky had a couple of guys getting banged up against LSU this past week, so sort of watch for availability there. Speaking of LSU, I have them as a 2.5-point home favorite against Tennessee. That might be the game of the day as far as ranked on ranked teams are concerned. Again, obviously Michigan State's always interesting as well. LSU got out of Dodge with a win over Kentucky. That was not impressive, right? Severe Wheeler goes out for Kentucky. Ty Washington was, banged up as well, sort of hobbling around in that game. And LSU barely wins. Of course, they almost blow the cover late in that game. My projection there is 2.5 for LSU. We'll see where the number is there. Florida and Auburn. Auburn is the juggernaut, I think, in the SEC. Just don't tell anybody. We're keeping it a secret. Florida gets absolutely hammered by Alabama at home. Now they have to go on the road to Auburn. Auburn might be in the beatdown zone here. I've got Auburn as a 9-point favorite here. Speaking of beatdown zones, Miami at Duke. I have Duke as a 16-point favorite in that game. UCLA goes to Cal. I have UCLA as a 7-point road favorite in that one. And then finally, Pepperdine and Gonzaga. How's a nightcap where there's a 28-point spread? That's where I have Gonzaga at 28-point favorites against Pepperdine. If this happens to be 30, 31, something like that, and you're looking to back Pepperdine, more power to you. Best of luck late on a Saturday night. So that and much more at Emrus Authentic on Twitter. Obviously, everything that I write over at The Score gets retweeted through there. So you get my college football pick, my college football player props, and my college football auxiliary props as well this week. And of course, everything, probably a first look at the NFL lines on Monday or even potentially Sunday night over at The Score there, as my keyboard will be on fire come Sunday evening.
I love it. And I can't wait, as this is a great time of the year. We got the college football final on Monday, week 18 of the NFL season. And of course, as you mentioned, college basketball. Where else would you rather be? This is just perfect. I love it. Thanks again for coming through and blessing us, as you always do, my friend.
Always a pleasure, my man. Let's get it this weekend. Last chance with the big slate.
And if you want to follow me online, you could do so on Instagram at Sheldon Alexander and on Twitter at Shell Alexander. Like and subscribe to the DRF Sports Podcast wherever you get your podcasts. And for more from this brand new project from DRF Sports, we just got to make sure, if you're not familiar with the letters DRF, Daily Racing Forum has been around for over 100 years, giving you all of the horse racing information, data, and analysis. But now we're taking over the entire sports world. So if you want all the coverage on every football game, as well as the NBA, MLB, and more, head to drf.com/sports for all of the details and insights, as the site has all the data on every game, including offensive and defensive stats, betting angles, line movements, key injuries, and more. The DRF data is what powers our power trends. So if you want to see which trends our analysts have selected, follow us on Instagram and on Twitter. If you want access to all of the raw data, go to drf.com/sports. That's where you get the usual game previews. And of course, we go in depth on this podcast. Basically, however you want your betting information, we've got you covered. That's all I got for now. But remember to tune into this DRF Sports Podcast every Tuesday and Friday. And hey, sometimes if you're lucky, we sprinkle in a little extra episode here and there. But until next time, that's all I got for now. See ya.
Thanks for listening to the DRF Sports Podcast. Please subscribe, rate, and review the show. For more sports betting advice, go to drf.com/sports and follow on Twitter at DRF_sports.